Welcome to Midlife Customs at Craig's Garage. In this video I show how I assembled my high performance spark plug wire set. If you like working on cars and watching DIY videos, then you should hit the subscribe button because that is what I post on this channel. Please take a quick minute to read this disclaimer. I am not a professional, nor do I claim to be. So I've been wanting to clean up the spark plug wires in my engine bay for quite a while, so I decided to get the high performance spark plug wire set from Ford Racing, and here is a shot at the model number. It is a 9mm set. In the set you'll get a set of wires which includes the coil wire, which are all numbered, which makes it really nice, and a bag with all the terminals and the boots. Here's a shot of what the terminals look like, what the boots look like, and also the terminal for the coil wire. The instructions are written on the side of the box, and I think they're actually really good. They do a really good job at explaining the process. I also picked up a spark plug wire crimping tool, which is a ratcheting set, and it actually makes that whole process really nice. I'll put a link in the description below to the set of spark plugs and also the tool. The first thing I needed to know was the way the cylinder numbers laid out and the firing order went. And here you can see the front of the engine and the way the distributor rotates, which is counterclockwise. And here you can see that there's a standard 302 firing order and then there's a high output firing order. I'll be using the standard 302. The next thing I wanted to do was mark where the number 1 spark plug went into the distributor. So I just put a piece of tape marking on the distributor where the number 1 would go in. Most of the time, and even instructions tell you that you should do one plug at a time, plug wire at a time, or mark them individually. So if it's your first time or haven't done it much, that's probably what you should do. But since I had a pretty good idea and I have done this before, I just went ahead and took them all out. And since the plug wires actually have the numbers on them, every one has its own number on it, I figured I can get it done. So how I went about doing this, and because I was actually trying to clean it up and make the length of them more custom, I went ahead and put all the plug wires in where they were going to go and just kind of routed them to the front of the engine. That way I can kind of manipulate and move it around to where I thought it was going to look good, and then I would custom make them and cut them there. The other thing I did was I loosely installed the boots facing the way they would be going as far as the cylinders, but they're not crimped on or anything, they're just on there loose. That way I can figure out which way I would like to put the wire and which way they would cross over by looking at it before I committed to that. After having everything kind of routed the way I wanted, now I can start with the number 1 spark plug. And one thing I wanted to keep in mind was that I wanted to give it a little bit of room to move. So when I mark it, I was actually going to just give it a little bit of room. You know, you also have to keep in mind that you might have to change the advance in the distributor. So I didn't want to cut it so tight that it was just not going to move at all. So I had to keep that in mind. Once I figured out the length I liked, I just took a little marker and put a line across right where it would go 90 down into the distributor. And I also put a line kind of like a T straight across on the top. That way I knew that was the top and let the spark plug wire rest the way it naturally wanted to instead of twisting it. So now here you can see where I marked it, and instead of cutting it right there, it's actually going to have to be cut 5/8 inches further down. But what I also wanted to do was cut past it to just try to test out what I'm going to be using to cut pieces and stripping. That way you could do tests on pieces that aren't going to matter instead of going right for cutting your plug. And if you mess up, then you're going to have to buy a whole new set. And here's what I mean by 5/8 inch pass. So this was the little mark, and it's actually going to need a 5/8 inch piece of line that goes folding back onto the terminals. So you're going to go 5/8 past your line, and that's where you're going to make your cut. It also recommends in the instructions that you use a little dishwasher soap on the wire, and it actually worked really good to put the boot on. Once I was able to put that on the wire, the boots actually did slide on a lot better. And you definitely want to put the boot on before you crimp it. That way you can just slide it past the terminal. So here's a look at the crimping tool, and you can see the part where the plug wire goes in, and it's like a little blade looking thing about halfway in. So you'll be placing this mark right above it. So you want to make sure that you line that mark up with the piece that's actually going to strip the outer layers away. So this thing is ratcheting, and I'm just going to go ahead and ratchet it all the way down. Another thing I noticed that seemed to help me better is once I had it all the way down, if I twisted it back and forth a couple times, that would make it a little better, because the crimping tool I think actually was like an 8mm and the plugs are 9mm, but it still did a great job. But by twisting the wire end back and forth, it eventually slid through. It takes a good amount of effort to get it done, but here you can see that the inner wire was still really good. If you nick that or cut it, you have to redo it. It has to be untouched. So here's another shot of the wire with the boot on it, and this wire gets folded back, and that's where the terminal goes on. So on that little straight line on the T, that's where I folded it back, and this is what it's going to look like, just a tad bit past the metal. So another thing that helped me was if I took a pair of pliers and kind of pre-bent it a little bit, because once it goes into the tool, if it's too spread out, it's a little bit harder to bend. So by making it tighter like that, and here you can see it's nice and tight, and that's folded back. It's just a little pass, and that's exactly what you want it to look like before you crimp it. And here's a shot at the one that's going to go to the coil. Pretty much the same thing. Fold it back, but this part's going to get folded at a 90 to fit this when it's done. So they both pretty much look a lot alike. So they're ready to get crimped. So when it comes to actually crimping the terminals, it's pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to get too much into this. You can see the bottom part is the rounded part, and then the up side is like an M shape, which will fold over the two tabs, and that's why I said if you kind of pre-bend them a little bit, it'll go in. But this is the way it sits once it's on the wire, and you'll just ratchet it down till it's done. And this is what they should look like after the terminals are crimped down. Really nice and tight, no cracks or anything. And this is where I'll bend it now that it's in, and I have to pull the boot over. So 90 on the coil wire end, and then slide the boot over. And when sliding the boots over, they're all going to be the same way. Use a little bit of the dishwasher soap, and it's going to take some effort. Just keep going until you get past it, and you have to make sure that there is no bumps left over. It has to be nice and flat. So after a while of trying. Here is what it looks like when you're done. As far back, it's not laying nice and flat inside, no bumps. It's sitting the way it should sit there. And here's a look at the coil one, which sticks past just a little bit. It's the only one that has a different end, by the way. All the others are the same. The coil wire needs this boot with that fitting. So here's another look of a completed plug. You have the one end I did, and like I said, nice and flat. And then on the other side, all these are already complete when they show up. So here's what the two ends look like when you're done. Ready to go. So now that I have my number one wire complete, I can go ahead and install it with the one end on the distributor where I had the piece of tape pointing to number one, and put that in on the spark plug cylinder, also number one. And here I show how I'll be setting it all up. So on the distributor, I'll start at 1 using the standard 302 firing order, and I'll go to 5, 4, 2, 6, 3, 7, 8. That's my firing order. And here's a completed look with all the wires cut and put into place. Like I said, I was trying to clean it up. I wanted to put the wires where I wanted them to be, and I think it turned out pretty well. If you need a new set of spark plugs for your 302, I would definitely recommend these. If you found this video helpful, please hit subscribe and leave a comment. And as always, thanks for watching.